Yeah, okay, we're recording.
Okay, cool. I'll just do a little intro then. Hi everyone, it is the CAPZ office hours. It's June 26th on Friday. We're just going to go ahead and introduce new members. So if you're new and want to say hi and talk about where you're from, go ahead and do that right now.
Hey guys, my name is Spencer. I'm new to this meeting at least. I've been hacking with David and Cecile the past few days on a few little bugs trying to get Talus working on Azure. So here we are. Cool.
Welcome, Spencer.
Thanks.
Welcome.
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 Hi folks, this is June. I'm from Spectral Cloud. I'm also new to this meeting.
Awesome. Welcome, June. It's great to see you in the meeting.
Hi.
Anyone else? Sorry, I'm just trying to claim host so I can share my screen. Did that work? Sorry, y'all. Okay. Do we have a note taker for today?
Once you, I will do it. Yes.
Thanks, David. I never saw the day where you did it. Okay, so we're gonna start with some PSAs, upcoming release plans. I'm assuming, Cecile, if you want to talk about that, go for it, and I'll talk about the next point.
Yeah, I got a few questions about when the next CAPZ release was gonna be and how the ongoing refactors were gonna affect that. So I just wanted to clarify. I think right now we're waiting for the 037 release from CAPI to move forward. We are currently developing on 037 alpha, but we want to get the official release before we can get a release for CAPZ. And the refactors are not going to impact release. They're ideally we would do it all in one piece and not release before it's done, but in practice I don't think that's going to be possible. So it's completely fine if we cut a release in the middle. It's all done in a way that the master branch is always releasable. So that's fine. There are a few PRs though that I would like to see merged before we can release, which are the one from ACE that removes the plain text secrets from the templates. I think that one is pretty important. There's my PR for etcd on data disk, which I've been waiting for 037 for, and now that it's there, I'm gonna rebase and get that ready for merge. And then the other one is David's PR to fix the reconcile loops. I think if we could get that in, that'd be great. Not necessarily blockers, but just things that I'm watching for. If there's anything else that I'm forgetting that you think should be waited for before we cut the next release, let me know. But I think ETA should be a week or two after the CAPI release is dropped, which should be first week of July.
Cool. Thanks, Cecile.
Yes.
All right. I will talk about the next one. So we're going to be looking for new moderators for this meeting, just specifically because I'm going to be taking off a couple months and then starting a new job. So we were thinking of doing it a couple ways. One way we could do it is we could have a sign up on the top of our agenda, and basically if you want to be the moderator for that month, we only have 2 meetings a month, go ahead and sign up your name and you'll be the moderator. And honestly, it's pretty show up, people will guide you through it. We'll give you the host key and everything, and you'll just have to upload if you record it, you'll have to upload that video to YouTube, and we'll show you how to do that too. But otherwise, you just go through the agenda items, hopefully do a call out for new agenda items and anything that you, and then we also do triage. So all of these we can help you with, but we love to see some new faces. So if you're recurring or if you're new, that's totally fine. Does anyone have any thoughts on how they want to do this, or Cecile?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if we do want to do the rotation and have people sign up, I added a table at the top of the document for like the next few things. We can try it out and see if anyone wants to give it a shot. And if you don't want to do the recording and everything, I can take care of that. You just have to speak. That's good.
I can do it next time.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Sure.
I will put my name for the next one.
Yay.
You did? Yeah.
Maybe we should do a sign up for note takers too. So
Good idea.
we put a little column next to it.
That's more work.
It is more work. David does it every week. All right. But yeah, if we want to do note takers, feel free, David, to just add a column. Honestly.
Yeah. We should spread the pain around.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the last person that was like a moderator can be the new note taker, like for the next week or something like that. Cool. Thanks, guys. So I'm glad we're set for at least the next month. That's awesome. And yeah, we'll just hopefully keep going like that. I'm guessing, Cecile, you'll keep adding new dates on there. And so we'll be good to go for the future. I'll miss y'all. Maybe I'll just come and watch the videos just for fun. Just be here. Okay, let's see. What month are we in this month? Okay. We're now going to go to our open discussion points. If you come up with anything, feel free to just add a bullet and we'll talk about it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is discussing E2E refactoring and tests and helpers. Matt, where's all you?
Yeah, well, this could be an open-ended discussion, but since Nader and Carlos are here and you guys seem much more clued in as to what's going on upstream, so I've been basically flailing around trying to get a good test written that mimics the AKS engine one that stands up an internal load balancer, external load balancer, and service and all that. And I've got it mostly working, but I was slowed down a little because there's some helper functions that were upstream in 037 that I copied locally. Now we have 037 alpha, I can take advantage of those, but those only help a little. So as I see people have already identified, there should be some other helper functions we can fall back on. So basically I went ahead and wrote some of those, but I don't know if I'm not happy with how the code is structured. And I'm just kind of looking for some guidance about here's how we want to do it, since we don't have a lot of these type of tests yet in CAPZ. So long story short, I think I'm just going to push my PR out in a few minutes as is, and people can have at it. And there's still a little more to do. But okay, so maybe my actual question is, I saw that we were talking about adding more helper functions and a proposal to do that. Is that specifically for things like standing up a pod or a job or basic objects like that? Is that the idea?
Yeah, for my opinion, like I was thinking to add some helper functions in the upstream, in the cluster API itself, like for my create deployments, daemon sets, and other basic functionalities as the first step. And maybe if it's too specific for CAPZ, then we add in our side. Then if it's like generic, if you're AWS or any other provider can use, we put in the framework in the upstream. This was my idea. I made a comment in the cluster API channel. I need to open an issue in their repo to specify all the helpers, or at least the initial idea for that to implement in their side. Like I did a PR for the network policies, and I was trying to reuse the AKS engine tests. I saw that, but I was not able to import the end-to-end testing from the AKS engine. Then I copied some part of the code to the CAPZ repo, but I didn't like that much because I thought we can reuse the code from just importing the library. Maybe if the AKS can export as a library the end-to-end, that might help us as well in this side. But like, it's just my opinion. Maybe Cecile or David can have other ideas as well.
I also want to say that I don't think, like just my opinion, like adding helper functions in the upstream where there's no test using them is probably not the best idea. If we need some helper functions, we can add them in our repo, and whenever like CAPI needs them, we can move them there and then take them out of here or add them to the framework or something. But just adding helpers just to have them there, I don't think is very helpful if nobody's using them.
Yeah, I saw one, like I was trying to identify in AWS, for example, to see if we can have like similar tests in the Azure side. And like I say, maybe we can have like one generic one that is in the upstream, and that AWS and DigitalOcean and Azure can reuse that. I was checking the other testing code to see if we can create a helper function that serves everybody, not just one. I agree in the idea of not having like code that is not used and is just there hanging there. Makes no sense actually.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I got slowed down. Is I wanted to make sure I wasn't duplicating code, because my assumption was there's got to be helpers like this out there, but I'm not familiar with CAPA and all the other stuff. So I took basically the approach Nader is saying, which is I wrote the stuff I needed, but in such a way that hopefully we can promote it up to CAPI if it's more useful in general.
Yeah, and that one stuff, I don't know, maybe it's more like a high level discussion, because I saw in the AWS one, they use the client and they create all the objects as a code. And in my implementation I did, and I saw in the AKS engine as well, I use the kubectl command line and execute in a shell. Like we need to see what we want. We want to execute kubectl, or do we want to create the client and use inside the code? There's these two options.
Yeah, I took the client go approach just because at some point Cecile said go that way, and so I did. Otherwise, it would have been a lot easier to copy over the test from AKS engine, but this is nice and standalone. So I think that. So anyway, I've probably talked enough. I'll just put the PR out there, and we can all see if it's useful as is, or if But that's good to know. I kind of want to know what the status was of the upstream helper functions. It sounds like we just proposed it and don't have an issue. So maybe the few things I've written plus the next set of tests we write would make it obvious these things could be promoted up to CAPI. Mostly just, I mostly just have helper methods around services and jobs right now.
Yeah, in the framework I saw, like they have only helpers just to check if a daemon set or a deployment is
or deployment, yeah. And I'm using the deployment stuff, and then I just wish they had other similar stuff, which is basically where you were coming from too.
Cool. Anything else to that topic? All right, let's move on. David, cycles and reconcilers.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Recently, I came across a bug. It's probably slightly self-inflicted. So went back through the reconcilers, and I added in the watches and the pause notifications for controllers. So as a cluster comes up, it's paused. We don't reconcile the objects that are associated to it. Likewise, it takes into account the annotation for pause on any of these sub-objects. So this is nice, but part of it was also an exercise where Jason DeTivers provided me some guidance on perhaps what we were doing wrong and not listening to some events in our controllers. So this led me to reworking the way that we do our watches. They are, I think, up to date. This then introduced a subsequent issue that we saw that I found that the Azure Cluster Reconciler is kicking off an event, and then that event causes Azure machines to reconcile. Now, the event in Azure Cluster Reconciler ends up triggering itself again because it thinks it's mutating the spec. And this is just the way that we're using the patch helper. But what I want to draw attention to is a more systemic thing that is really easy to fall into and is totally pernicious. If you get into cycles in your watches, the reconcilers are going to just chew through CPU, and it's going to just fill up your logs, and it's going to be nasty. So just be aware, and I'm not sure exactly how we go about testing it, because I would love to see some sort of a test that says, hey, steady state, we keep reconciling. What are you doing? And that would be fantastic. If somebody has an idea about that, I would love to hear it. Maybe something based off of observed generation. After we get the observed generation into the status, maybe we could just sit there and say, hey, we're watching this thing. Has it cycled or something like that? Anyway, that's the gist of it. Anybody have any questions, ideas? Just be careful. Okay, cool.
Don't do that.
Yeah. If somebody comes up and sees something like that, or has a great idea for a test that we could observe the cluster and know that it's in a not good state, let me know. I'd love to add it.
Cool. I tried to capture that. All right. So Spencer, welcome to our meetings. And cool. So you want to talk about removing security groups from status and external IP support? Go for it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, so I just wanted to bubble up the couple of things that have been blocking me this week. Cecile dropped a PR yesterday for removing some fields from the cluster status, the Azure cluster status, which I think works fine. But it looks like it's not going to pass. I think it's not going to get merged automatically, right? Because it removes something from the API. So I don't know. I just noticed that this morning, and I wanted to bring it up and just see like what the process was for that. Because I'll pull that in as soon as I can and work off of that, and that should fix this stuff.
I just approved it. It was missing the self-approval. The API diff isn't required. It's just for reviewers to get a heads up that something's changing in the API.
Got it. Okay, awesome. So I'll rebase my PR on that. That should fix the test I ran into yesterday. And then I'm working through the default values and the validation stuff for priorities this morning, or this afternoon now. The other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know how, I just wanted to get a sense for priority and kind of, if it was going to come soon or if I should start taking a look at it myself in regards to like the Azure machines failing to provision when you allocate a public IP, right? So the way we're using this, at least internally with Talos, is we've got Talos is a little weird because the OS itself publishes an API that you can interact with the operating system on port 50,000, right? So and as part of that, I need basically public access to the nodes. I'm totally hitting this. I wasn't, and then once I got past some of the other bugs that I ran into this week, I hit it right away. So anyway, just trying to get a feel for where that is, I guess.
So so I'm working on that right now, actually. I just wanted to get the first refactor PR in there because it refactors all of public IP. And so it would be very tricky to like fix that and then have to like rebase and fix it again, basically. So I'm working on a branch that's based on like the new public IP reconcile and then trying to get that working. It's a little tricky because basically this broke because we added outbound rules to the load balancer, which are required to provide outbounds to VMs in Azure when you're using a standard load balancer when you don't have public IPs assigned. The problem is that you can only have one public load balancer attached per IP configuration. And so you can't have those VMs with public IPs attached to the load balancer that have outbound rules, but they also have to be attached to the same load balancer for exposing services with cloud provider. So right now, talked about it with David a little bit, and he had a pretty good idea of like maybe trying to add a separate network interface configuration and try to use that for the public IP. That might change things on your end. So I'll talk to you about that, how it might impact, because it will basically it won't be the primary IP config anymore. It will be a secondary one.
Okay. Yeah, that might get interesting on our side, but I
yeah,
mean, we have
we'll
support for it, but it's
that.
not something that it's not something we
play
with very often.
But I'd rather do that than have the Kubernetes service be secondary. So
sure, yeah, okay, no, that's great. Like I said, I mean, I think those are really the only two things that are blocking us now.
Yeah.
Things have been, I mean, we're getting really close to being able to say like for real, Talos works on Azure. So cool. Yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Any more questions? Okay, cool. I have a couple random call outs, so I'll do this kind of quickly. But by the way, Red Hat has a fork of CAPZ.
CAPZ?
CAPZ. They also have one of CAPB. I had another link somewhere. I didn't link it though. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't think any of us have talked to Red Hat yet. So
Red Hat, before they use anything in OpenShift, they always have forks of it for everything. So they probably have forks of Kubernetes and everything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Red Hat people working on like CAPI.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And then another thing I want to talk about was our notion of a community repo. And starting that conversation up. So we were thinking of creating some sort of community repo on the side of CAPZ, like in some other organization, to support integrations that we won't necessarily support end-to-end in CAPZ. And so I think that's just an open question on how we do it. What kinds of integrations are we talking about? Do we go all the way to the infra layer? Like, for example, would Flatcar support land there instead of CAPZ? Does that even make sense? So like things like that, I'd love to start talking through or thinking of at least. We don't have to do this now, but if anyone has thoughts on where we should draw that line in the sand, and it's something that we talked about. So if we don't want to do community repo, that's also something we can talk about. The notion is we don't want to land every integration or every configuration in CAPZ. We'd like to land that somewhere else too. David, you have a little friend.
Photobomb.
Oh. So yeah, does anyone have any comments?
No, just David can give his tasks to his son, and then just switch.
Yeah, maybe we can sign him up for a note taker.
So I do have one thing that I would like to try to say about this. Perhaps this is something that should come in the context of the plugins that we've been talking about in like Cluster Cuddle. Maybe that is part of this conversation, because really those could end up having like all sorts of different hooks and customizations that folks want to get into.
I'm kind of curious about where we draw the line for documentation and add-ons and stuff, since there's probably going to be a lot of things where we're going to want to say, go install the Helm chart. That's the best way to do it. Is that already something, just the documentation itself that talks about the Helm chart? Is that something we would want to have in like a contrib community project, or does that, if it's just documentation, does it stay in CAPZ?
Yeah, I think we want to have pointers to the right places. So like someone should be able to land in CAPZ or the CAPI book and understand like all the different components that they need to be able to build a fully functioning solution. And so maybe like some sort of like good path or a happy path for them. For all the peripherals, like and that I think should be well documented for all the different options. Like David said, I think those can be exposed through the templates and more documentation through like individual templates, and like what the different options are there. And then also links to either like Azure documentation or Helm charts. I think it's going to be a mix of all of that. Because I don't want all the document. I don't think we need to document every little configuration of what it does.
Yeah.
But we should link out. So.
Yeah, that's kind of the trade-off I was imagining, is to the extent that we document something like a Helm chart, in detail directly in CAPZ documentation, it sort of implies we're supporting it to whatever extent we support CAPZ. And that's not what we want to do. We want to be like, this should work, but you're on your own. On the other hand, actually linking to separate documentation is pretty rude for most users. So there's a fine line there for.
Yeah, I think like enabling them to like, for example, deploy the stuff will still live in CAPZ through ideally this template configurations we're talking about, to find out more of what it does. Because like we're not going to be supporting every single option. For example, we're not going to be testing that. And so those templates possibly live somewhere else. Maybe it's a different folder, like where they live, like that will be kind of the unsupported. And other folks can create those integrations. And ideally they can go as far as they want with documentation, but our stance will be like, make sure people can get to the right information, but we should fully document a happy path. That makes sense. But the line's going to have to be drawn. I think it's going to be drawn in multiple places, and that's going to be a decision we're going to have to make per feature configuration. Cool. I think the next step for this is basically like creating an issue probably, so we can discuss it further on. It goes into templates. It also goes into like, do we need a separate repo for this? And so does that sound good? I'll just throw something up so we have it documented. Okay, will do. Ernest, testing provider Azure with CAPZ.
Hey, could you let me share my screen? I don't think I can share my screen right now. Oh, I think I can share my screen now. All right, thanks. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I'm Ernest. I've spent.
See the Zoom meeting.
Sorry.
I lied. That was me. You're good.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I've been spending the past month or so helping CAPZ increase the test coverage. So initially, CAPZ has a script called CI conformance, which is basically a bash script that helps users and developers to run conformance tests and basically help you build a CAPZ cluster, run Kubernetes upstream conformance tests against the CAPZ cluster, and then help you garbage collect clusters. So it's like an all-in-one script to help you run upstream Kubernetes end-to-end tests. But then we want to increase our test coverage. So I modified the script and rename it to CI entry point. So not only can we run upstream Kubernetes end-to-end tests, we can also start running some Azure-specific tests or any other Kubernetes-related tests against CAPZ clusters. So if you go to our CAPZ repo and go to the development documentations, in the last section, you can see we have a conformance testing sections, which basically documents how we can use the script to run the end-to-end test. So you can simply just call the script, and before you call the script, you can set a couple of environment variables. And to run non-Kubernetes upstream end-to-end test is very simple. All you have to do is just declare this upstream skip upstream end-to-end test to true. Actually, I have to change it to true. But anyway, all you have to do is just declare this environment variable and simply call the script, and you can CD into your whatever project you have and call a make target to run the end-to-end test. So this way, the script will help you create a CAPZ clusters, and it will run whatever command you supply, and then it will help you tear down a cluster if you choose to. And let's see, and you can also bring your own CAPZ clusters. So you can also define a variable called skip create workload clusters, so you can continuously run end-to-end tests against your existing CAPZ clusters. And currently, besides conformance tests, we are also running a bunch of Azure specific tests. So here, as you can see, we have conformance tests for machine deployment and machine pull CAPZ clusters. In addition to that, we also run Azure Disk and Azure File. So those are storage specific end-to-end tests. So let's see. So you can see here. So yeah, this is end-to-end test for CAPZ 116 cluster. And we also run the same set of tests against machine pull, as you can see here. And apparently there are some error in the Azure File one, so I'm going to take a look at that. But yeah, overall, the next step would be to continue increasing the test coverage. What I will be working on is to incorporate more Azure-specific tests. More specifically, I want to add cloud provider Azure-specific end-to-end tests to test stuff like load balancer, network security groups, stuff like that. And if you guys don't know, this is test script. Basically, it's a dashboard where we show our historic test result. I can paste a link in the chat for you guys to check it out and check out the result, and you can play around with it. And last but not least, I also want to talk about the log collection dump that I worked on last month. So basically, each job run, if you click on it, you can also click on artifacts, and you can check out all the logs, all the control plane logs, and all the management cluster and workload logs. So for example, if we go to workload clusters, you can see that we have a control plane and some machine deployment. And if you click on control plane, you can check out all the logs for all the pods in the control plane. So for example, we can check out the API server log. And yes, so this is here because it'll help us debug any test failure, which is very useful. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me paste a link in the chat, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
This looks very cool. I just saw that inside of the log section, you also have the cloud init logs.
Yep.
How do you collect those logs?
Yeah. So basically, yeah, cloud init log. What I've done is at the end of each job run, I basically deploy a daemon set, and the daemon set will mount itself. Basically, there's a file mount. I think the cloud init lives in like some /var/run. So basically, I just have to mount the specific folder from the VM to the daemon set pod, and I can run some kubectl commands to copy the contents of the cloud init log to a local directory, and the CI will upload all the logs from that local directory to the Google Cloud Storage.
That's very nice. Thank you. Yeah, very cool.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks.
Hey, Ernest, dude, thanks for doing that. It saved my butt a few times. Like, I totally use it like on pretty much every PR because everything I write first is broken, and then I have to diagnose why, right? So yeah, this is super helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Cool.
Yay, thank you. It's awesome to see that in action. Cool. Okay, Cecile, do you want to go at the end after triaging or right now?
I can go now if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll share my screen. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a bit about the refactor story stuff that's I've been working on recently, in case people are curious seeing these big PRs in the queue, and talk a bit about the design behind it. So basically what we're trying to do is, and this is from an old issue that's been open for a long time, we're trying to simplify the way we do reconcile deletes. So we used to have this like get, reconcile, delete, and then each service reconcile would take a spec, and that spec would be defined within the service, and it would basically be like the kind of info you need. Like for example, the public IP name or public IP DNS name. And in addition to that, each service is also takes a scope, and the scope is usually cluster scope or machine scope or both. And that contains information about the clusters or the machine. So like the cluster name or the resource group or the location. And we would use a mix of that information in the services. So you'd be using like scope.resource group, and at the same time, you'd be doing like spec.public IP name. Which isn't great. And so there are a few things I'm trying to address here. So I'll talk about the goals first before talking about like the actual implementation. But I think the main goals are to, first of all, get rid of this like spec interface input and output. And we only want to have a clean service looking like this. So reconcile and delete only takes context and returns error. And each Azure cluster, or like each object reconcile and delete loop is a composition of smaller service reconciles and deletes. So for example, Azure cluster reconciles public IPs, it reconciles load balancers, it reconciles resource groups, etc. And so what I want to get to in the end is you just have like each object is just a composition of calling other reconciles instead of what we're doing now, which is the services do a bunch of logic of like setting the spec and then calling reconcile for each different resource. So if you have two public IPs you have to provision, it will call reconcile public IPs twice, once for each public IP with a different spec. And then the other goals, and I think this summarizes it pretty well, is we want to make it possible to share services between different objects. So for example, I'm taking public IP as an example a lot because this is what this PR does, but it's actually a really good use case. That's why I chose it. Public IPs are reconciled both in machines and in Azure clusters right now. For Azure clusters, you need a public IP for the load balancer, for the public load balancer. And for machines, this is the use case that Spencer was talking about earlier. If you want a public IP assigned to your node, then that's going to get reconciled by Azure Machine. So we want to make it possible to share the services, the service that reconciles public IPs between two different Azure CAPZ resources. Also, the services shouldn't care about what object, what resource they're reconciling against. They should just care about the Azure stuff. So when we're testing, this is really important because when we write unit tests, I know a lot of you have like helped write unit tests for services, and you've probably noticed you need to like define all this like scope stuff, and like the services actually test more than like creating Azure resources right now because they have to have knowledge of this like scope and this spec. But really they should just care about the stuff that is specific to the Azure resource they're responsible for. So the public IP service should only care about the DNS name and the public IP names and how many public IPs it needs and like their specification. It shouldn't care about what VNet resource group the cluster is in and all of that extra stuff. And that also leads into the third thing, which is the scope has should be very explicit. The service should be very explicit about what it needs from the scope. Right now, the scope is kind of like this like all-knowing object that you use everywhere, and it can. You have no guarantee that it's actually going to have the information you need for the service. And so the idea is that we want to make it explicit exactly what information each service needs. That being said, this PR is really big because it lays kind of all the groundwork for it, including some auth changes. So I'm just gonna look at this smaller one, which is basically I took this PR and on top of it, I implemented the same thing for network interfaces. And the idea is that it's a lot smaller because it only contains the network interfaces changes. But I just want to show you a bit what it looks like. Hold on, service. And please cut me off if you have any questions, by the way. Okay, so this is what the new service looks like. So instead of taking scope and machine scope, because right now network interfaces need information about both the network and about the machine itself that they're going to be the network interface for, we define this new interface, which each service is going to have one, and it defines what information that service needs. And so when the Azure reconciler calls, or sorry, when the Azure cluster reconciler calls reconcile network interfaces, then it uses cluster scope, and cluster scope implements network interface scope. And when the machine reconciler, Azure machine reconciler, needs to call network interfaces, if it does, it will call, it will implement network interface scope with the machine scope. In this case, right now, only Azure Machine calls this function, but in the public IP case, as I said before, there's two. And there's also cases where like machine pool and machine share the same services, or managed cluster and managed machine pool. Like there's some overlap there. So that's the idea. And then, so what this is, Nix specs is, where is it? It basically returns a list of network interface specs. So we don't assume that so we know that most services will usually have to create several resources. So instead of having to like call the reconcile service multiple times from the reconciler from the controller, we only call it once, and it knows like the list of services that it needs to create, the list of resources. And so, for example, for the network interface, this is very similar to what used to be in the service itself. Like here. And so, so now it knows that the scope has to have that information. And so what I was looking at before, that's in machine scope. And so machine scope defines this, and any other resource, CAPZ resource that needs to reconcile network interfaces should also define this, and they might have a different implementation, return different things. But in this case, it is specific to machine network interfaces, and yeah. So yeah, I think that's mostly it. I mean, if you're curious, I think the best way is to look at the code. I can't go over every line now, but I just wanted to give a kind of quick overview of what the idea behind the refactor was. And then in terms of testing, it's pretty cool because now we can mock the scope. And so instead of having to like define the scope in the unit test, you can mock it, and then you can control what it returns. And let's look at the unit test. So yeah, also this is all gone because we don't need to test for invalid spec anymore, because the spec will always be valid. That's pretty cool, not using an interface type. And then where is it? Just want to show you the bottom. There are a lot of tests here. Okay. Yeah. So all of this is gone. And this was basically like this was defined for every service unit test. It was shared amongst all the test cases. So that also didn't give that much flexibility. And so now we're not defining this anymore. Instead, each test case has, like this mock for like the scope. And so it's able to say like, okay, if I call network interface specs, then return this, and this is gonna be my definition. And based on this, I expect this, network interface to be created. Yeah. Anyone have any questions or comments or feedback, or are you all just confused?
I think it looks cool, but I also don't have to work with it. Anyone else have comments?
I like it so much.
Yeah, I think it's a big improvement. It definitely makes the testing easier, which is an indication that it's a better design, I guess.
Cool. All right. Anyone have? Let me check this. Let me share my screen. Let's check the agenda and double check. I don't think we have anything else. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna triage this really quickly the last 10 minutes, so we can get these new issues in. Okay, fix Azure cluster reconcile loop cycle. In progress. Review in progress.
In progress.
It is in progress, and I expect that I will have that shored up today.
Cool.
Just a couple comments to go through.
Document test use of external DNS. I'll put this in the backlog. Bug. Okay, I'm gonna put that as in progress.
Yeah, that one's fine.
Line call should include scope and reconciling. Backlog. Fix internal LB subnet addressing. Okay.
That's review in progress.
Cool. Thanks. Internal load balancer address selection broken when using subnets longer than 8 charts. Okay. I'm gonna put this in the backlog. Should I put it in to do?
It's actually in progress. This is the same, or actually maybe it should be closed. I'll check.
Okay, it's linked. Yeah. Cool.
That's the issue that's the other PR is fixing.
Oh yeah, it's the same one. Yeah.
So I'll just put it in. Okay, cool. Test EUE networking policies in progress. Okay. Mock test do not call control finish. So I say like super weird. Okay, put that there. Does not currently handle creating separate route tables for node and control plane. To do backlog. Okay. Create fails when allocate public IP is enabled in Azure machine.
To do. Yeah.
Okay. Refactor public IP service to get spec from scope. In progress. CAPZ should use added trade cloud controller manager and storage drivers. Backlog. Okay. Initial support for conditions for Azure cluster and Azure machine. In progress. And then cloud services add fashion host service. In progress. Okay. Cool. Let's just double check these to-dos. Or actually like the in progress, make sure everything's looks right. Okay. Why are these here?
So I believe the last one has a PR open that
Isn't linked? so weird.
Maybe it isn't. I'll check.
Okay. I'm
yeah,
going
we
to
should
move it into because it doesn't have a
that's
linked
good.
PR.
Sounds good.
And same with enhancement proposal breakout cloud resource reconciliation. I don't see a linked PR on that one either. So I'm going to move it to do for now. If you guys just link the PR, we can move it back if there is one. Okay, so we're going to move this guy in progress as a linked PR. Adopt conditions for Azure cluster, Azure machine. Okay, yeah, we'll put that in progress. Cool. I think that's right. Okay, backlog. Is there anything? Oh, something just went into done in real time.
I closed the PR.
Okay, cool. To do that seems okay. Okay, is there anything in the backlog that we need to move to do? Anything that someone's going to be working on? Oh, this guy has a support code domains for Azure Machine Pools. Has anyone seen this one?
Yeah, I think that's in progress / review in progress.
Okay, I'll put it in progress. Bootstrap failure detection. Multi-tenancy with one manager instance. Should we move that to do?
Yeah, maybe we should move all the priority important ones to do, just so we have them as separate, because the backlog's pretty big.
Okay. Yeah, we're starting to get into territory of the next milestone anyway. So, I mean, we have another month of this milestone, but for the next one, like, I think we're going to be closing it out kind of in the middle of the month. So feel free to start picking up stuff for next, which is great. Reduce the amount of cluster create time. Dude, I think you're working on that. Windows worker nodes. Yeah, okay, we're working on it. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot to do. That's okay. This will help form our milestone. So we can take a look at that too. Okay, it looks good to me for now. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, awesome. Anything else? 1 minute.
Thanks, Ria, for hosting. We'll miss you.
No problem. I'll miss you guys too.
Jane Spencer, welcome. Thank you. Great to see you all.
Thanks, Joe. Have a good one.
Yes.
Hey, take it easy, everybody.
Welcome and goodbye. Have a good weekend. Happy Friday.
Ew. See ya.
Bye.